Today, I'm talking with Kim Crawley, and she is in Canada. And I found her, I think, through Twitter, and that's where I bumped into her series on YouTube about privacy for noobs. And that's what triggered my attention. Of course, there's a lot of other things about you that triggered my attention, but when we talk about privacy and security, that really triggered my attention. And I'd say, let's talk to this woman. And you started in your career on education really in this area about IT and network, and because I meet a lot of people in this area who has no education in this area and just stumbled into this in this work. But for me, it sounds like you already from the beginning were very interested in this topic.
Yeah, although I didn't really start studying IT until my mid-20s. So I had kind of a rocky start. I did start in tech support, like remote tech support, about 2000, like the late 2000s. In a typical day, I would remotely remove malware from about 30 Windows PCs. And so that made me catch the cybersecurity bug. But I think through my experiences, I've learned that although I'm capable of functioning in an IT role, I'm a lot better as a writer and as a researcher.
Yeah,
And
I saw that too. Yes. So you worked as a rep and answering questions, helping people with issues on their computers, on PCs. And when you were bitten by the bug, you started going to college and university to dive into the deeper. Is this how it went?
I acquired some like basic CompTIA certs first, like the A plus and the Network plus. Those certs have long since expired because I haven't really needed to renew them, because no one ever asks me for certifications these days. My work now is based on my reputation as a writer and as a researcher. So at the moment, where my career is at now is I'm focused on writing books, and I do a lot of like threat intelligence research on the side. One of my clients right now is a major Canadian bank. And in my downtime, as you saw, I make wacky videos about internet privacy with my teddy bear.
Just help me. What is it? What you do for the banks, for example?
Oh, threat research.
What does that
Well,
mean?
it means that whatever cyber threats are targeting that particular bank, I'm supposed to do research on them and write reports about them,
So
mainly on the dark web.
so it's not about preventing the threats. It's about researching them afterwards. And what happens with the research?
I think internally they make slideshow presentations, and all the reports, the information that I give them is strictly internal and confidential and all that stuff. And they use the reports to strengthen their defenses and to investigate the various cybercrime groups that are targeting their bank. That much I can say without violating a non-disclosure agreement.
Yeah,
I'm not even supposed to say the name of the bank,
that's okay.
but I am allowed to say it is one of Canada's major banks.
So from these researchers, what is it that you've learned in the last couple of years, in the last 2-3 years?
Oh, like in my career overall, I've gotten a better understanding of advanced persistent threats. And I think one thing that I learned in the past few years that surprised me the most is most of the most destructive cyber attacks don't target, they don't target 0-day vulnerabilities. And they're not always 0-day exploits. A lot of the actually most of the exploits that are, the vulnerabilities, sorry, that are exploited have been known to the cybersecurity community for quite some time. Like, for instance, software vulnerabilities that are in the CVE. So that surprised me. I thought that the worst cyber attacks would exploit vulnerabilities that we don't even know about. But no, people leave the same damn vulnerabilities open all the time. Even like big corporations and enterprises and stuff like that.
And 0-day vulnerabilities, that means it's the first time that's happening?
That's the first time that the cybersecurity community has knowledge of it.
Right, right. How many new vulnerabilities did you discover?
I never discovered any new vulnerabilities. I know people who have contributed to databases like the CVE quite a lot. I don't have any CVEs to my name. I mainly observe what people have already discovered, except for what I see on the dark web. But I haven't really found anything that I could base the CVE on, if that makes any sense.
Okay, I'm asking all these weird questions, which are very normal for you, but not for me. So, what is a CVE?
We call it a record in the Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures database. So there is a giant database that is free and accessible for anyone to look at. I think that, and if you just Google CVE as an acronym, you'll probably find it. And when cybersecurity researchers and bug hunters find new vulnerabilities in software and in hardware, they write a record about it in the CVE, and it gets given a code name like CVE and then some 5-digit number and then the 4-digit year. And so when it's in the CVE, then it becomes known.
Right.
Yeah.
But so what you do mostly is you research, but and you also research on the dark web.
For this particular bank I'm working for, I research on the dark web. Yeah.
Okay, I've been hearing this dark web once in a while. How is it different than the normal web?
Okay, I can define it pretty simply. There is the ClearNet, which is the normal internet that we use every day, that we don't need any special software that we don't already have to use. And then there's the dark web, which is a part of the web that is only accessible if you have software on your computer or on your smartphone to use one of the two major proxy networks. The biggest one is Tor, the Tor network, and then the second major one is I2P. So anyone can download the software that they need to access it for free, and it's perfectly legal. It's perfectly legal to download and use that software, and it's legal to visit the dark web. It's only illegal to engage in illegal activity while you're on the dark web, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and so why do you want to go on the dark web as a person?
Because the reason why cyber criminals prefer to use the dark web to talk about their cyber attacks and to sell malware and stuff like that is because on the normal part of the web, it's a lot easier to track people if they're engaged in illegal activity. If you're on the dark web, the way that the Tor network works and the way that the I2P network works is it basically, instead of the data just being transmitted between your computer and the web server, like in a straight line, it goes, your data leaves your computer, like you're requesting a web page, for instance. It goes to one of Tor's proxy servers, and then it goes to another one of Tor's proxy servers, and it goes through several of them until it gets to a web server on the dark web. And all the time that your data is going back and forth between all these proxy servers, it's anonymizing you. So only the last machine in that chain that your PC spoke with has any identification information about your PC whatsoever. So it's not impossible for law enforcement to catch people on the dark web. Usually the way they do it is they park on an exit node and stuff like that, but it's a lot harder for law enforcement to track illegal activity on the dark web. So that's why they prefer to use the dark web. There are dark web markets that are very popular and have existed since the Silk Road about 10 years ago. And they sell almost anything illegal you can possibly imagine. So you can buy cocaine, you can buy ecstasy and crystal meth, you can buy machine guns, you can buy all kinds of illegal stuff. But what I'm interested in when I'm researching on behalf of this bank is I don't care about the illegal drugs or anything like that. I care about the data from the banks that cyber criminals are selling, because like when there's a big data breach, for instance, cyber criminals will take that breached information and they will sell it on the dark web. So for instance, you can get like a massive database of people's credit card information, for example. And they also sell exploits. So they sell the applications and they sell malware that you can use to engage in cyber attacks. So that's what I'm interested in looking at as a cybersecurity researcher for the bank, is that kind of thing.
So as a person, the reason to go on the dark web is probably that you're going to do something illegal.
Well, for a lot of people, that's why they use the dark web. For some people, though, there are noble uses. Like there are legal reasons for Tor and for I2P to exist. For example, like the US government developed a lot of the technologies that Tor is built on. And so there is a purpose for it. Like for instance, if you're in some war-torn country and you're a journalist and you're reporting vital information about all the bad things that are happening in that country, you might want to use the Tor network rather than use the regular part of the internet, because you don't want your local government to be prosecuting you.
Right, right. Is that a large part, or is that just a minor part of the dark web?
Honestly, I've never looked into it. Like all the time that I've spent on the dark web has been either in dark web markets where they sell illegal stuff, or it's been on like the Dread forum, which is like the Reddit for the dark web. And sometimes people on the Dread forum, sometimes people talk about perfectly normal stuff. Like I got this really cool video game, but a lot of the discussions on the Dread forums are about cyber attacks being planned and stuff like that. So
you have a profile on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter. Is there something similar where you network with people on a dark web?
no, when I do my research on the dark web, I just lurk. I'm just sitting there and watching and taking screenshots and making observations. I never post anything to the dark web. I have to have a user account on these dark web markets, but otherwise I don't make my presence known at all.
Right.
I have certain lines that as a researcher, I don't feel emotionally comfortable with crossing. And one of them is pretending to be someone who I'm not. So I'm not going to go onto a forum and say, hey, I'm looking to cyber attack this bank. Does anyone want to join in and help me? Like I know that law enforcement does a lot of stuff like that. If a company ever asks me to do that in particular, I will say no, because I don't feel comfortable doing that. But I feel perfectly comfortable looking at, malware that's being sold, for instance, and taking a note of it and then writing a report on it for my client.
Right. The the things you're telling me right now, I think is unknown to many people. For you, it's so normal, but I think it's very unknown to a lot of people. We've heard about the dark web, but we have no idea what it is. And
you can go on it today if you want.
I know I could, but then I have to I do have to research. I have to get all this stuff. I have an account, and I feel already criminal if I'm thinking about this part. But it's
Which country are you in?
Netherlands.
You're in the Netherlands. It's perfectly legal in the Netherlands to download the Tor browser, install it on your computer, and look at the dark web.
Yes, I trust it, but somehow it feels not okay to be there. And I think that, so you're a researcher, you do this now for a bank in a case, but you also do this for the blogs that you write for?
I haven't done a lot of research on the dark web for my blog writing work, to be honest with you. I did a lot of work contributing to big corporate tech blogs for years. BlackBerry Silence's blog, Sophos Naked Security, Venafi, Tripwire State of Security. For the past few years, I've been contributing to AT&T Cybersecurity's blog. The only corporate blog that I still contribute to on a regular basis is AT&T Cybersecurity's blog. So my career is transitioning more into writing books and doing threat research. And it looks like I also have a temporary job coming up running the social media for another tech company. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I have a really weird career, which is probably why you're interested in
me. And the writing, for example, on the AT&T cybersecurity blog, mm-hmm. that is a business, that is a job where you get paid for, right?
Definitely.
And what is it kind of course we can look it up, but what kind of topics do you write about?
If you look at, it's easy to look at every single thing I've ever written for that blog, and I've covered so many different bases. I've written articles for highly technical people. I've written articles for business people who aren't necessarily technical, but they're making decisions about their business, about whether they should do anything to improve their network security, even if they're not technical. And then there are other articles that are written for ordinary people who are not technical and who are not making decisions for a large company, but they need to know about certain things like their everyday internet use and their phone use and stuff like that. So I have a really great editor for AT&T Cybersecurity's blog. Her name is Kate Brew. And we have an absolutely wonderful relationship. And she basically lets me write about anything as long as it's relevant to cybersecurity and it aligns with AT&T's marketing objectives. As long as those two criteria are met, she lets me write about whatever I want. So I'm really grateful to her. She's great.
Cool. And what is, if you look at from a business perspective you have to make decisions of the security for internet access for your company, what are two major tips that you have shared on the blog?
That's a great question, because I'm also writing a book about that right now. I think, first of all, I think the biggest problem, especially with medium and large size businesses, is convincing the people who control the budget in the organization to spend some of it on security. So I think convincing the non-technical business people, like the chief financial officer, for instance, on why there should be a cybersecurity budget is one of the biggest problems, because if you don't understand the growing and expensive cyber threat landscape, for instance, and how much money the company could lose in the long run if they don't spend a little bit of money on security now. CFOs, for instance, don't necessarily understand that. They might be obsessed with like next quarterly profits or when their next multi-million-dollar bonuses. So I think technical people, having to convince those people can be really difficult. So that's probably problem number one as far as business security is concerned.
What is the most important actions you can take to secure yourself better as a company?
As a company, I would say do an inventory of everything that you use in your network. Take an inventory of the TCP/IP ports that you use. Take an inventory of all the operating systems and applications and stuff like that. And think of whether you need to use it or not. And if you do need to use it, keep it and focus on security hardening it. If you don't need to use it for some reason, then take it out of your network, close it, disable it. In cybersecurity, we call that your cyber threat attack surface. So if you can reduce it, it's good. I'll give you a specific example. Ransomware these days is a huge problem to large organizations. When ransomware targets Windows in the enterprise, 90% of the time it's going through the Windows RDP port, which is remote desktop protocol. If I was hired by a large corporation to security harden their Windows network, the first thing I would do, well, one of the first things I would do is I would ask the IT people, do we need to have RDP open? Do we need to use RDP? Maybe consider alternatives to RDP, such as SSH, because it's basically how do you remote into these systems? So if you can find another way to do it that doesn't use RDP, then that would be good. If you're not using RDP, close it. If you can find alternatives to RDP, use the alternatives.
Right.
So, but you can take that concept and you can expand upon it so that nothing is running in your network that doesn't need to be running in your network.
And what did change with all the employees starting to work from home in March? What did change in cybersecurity land?
That is a big issue. Like for the past 10 years, the whole bring your own device issue has been a big one in cybersecurity, which is, for example, when an employee takes their phone or their laptop to their workplace and connects it to their web network, because whatever vulnerabilities are on those devices, it's adding to how the company's network can be attacked. But now people because of COVID, they're having to work from their homes more, and they have to connect to their company's network from home. So in a sense, it's like bring your own device in another way, because there's no difference fundamentally from taking your own like iPhone or Android phone into your workplace and connecting it to your company's Wi-Fi, or being at home and from your home PC logging into your company's network. Fundamentally, there's no difference. It's something that has to be done. I think all employees who are working from home would benefit from having someone from the company contact them with a checklist of things that they can do to make their computer more secure.
Your series for noobs on privacy, obviously it's for noobs, but what is it? Who is it really for? Why do you need to teach them?
That is an absolutely excellent question. Uh, I have a big concern that, like, these days, over 3 billion people worldwide use the internet on a regular basis. And a lot of those people aren't very tech savvy, and even people who are tech savvy might have some bad habits in their internet use. Even I have done things that have not been the best as far as my security is concerned. But I think lay people, like ordinary people, are very much intimidated by information technology and like IT related concepts. So I think it's very useful to explain to them what is encryption, for instance, and should I use a VPN, and do I need a password manager, and stuff like that. There are little things that ordinary people can do that can make them a lot safer in their everyday internet use. And I think doing videos with my teddy bear is a great way to approach it, because off the bat, it makes it a lot less intimidating because I'm presenting it as something fun. So, I hope, like, that's just a little hobby thing I do in my spare time, but I'm having a lot of fun with it. Everyone knows I have a close, intimate relationship with Ossington the bear, so might as well let that out there.
And so you've divided it into like 5, 6 videos, 101, encryption, encrypt internet traffic, social media, and secure communications.
I've only made the first 2 videos so far.
Okay, but that's okay. But so if you look on, like you mentioned a couple of things. Do I need to use a password manager? Do I need to use VPN? On those kind of steps, what is most important to do as somebody who's working from home, or somebody's just accessing the internet as an independent person?
I think if we can all install a password manager in our desktop web browser and on our phones, that would be a big improvement right off the bat, because one of the most common mistakes that people make is they use the same password for multiple services. So they might use the same password for Facebook, for Twitter, for Amazon, and so on and so forth. And that's a bad idea, because data breaches happen all the time. So the information gets leaked out into places like the dark web of what your password is for a particular service. So then cyber criminals will take that information. And then you might, if you found out that like Facebook had a data breach, for instance, you might go in and then change your Facebook password. And that's good. You should do that if you find out that Facebook has been breached. But then cyber criminals, knowing the password that you used to use for Facebook, will take that password and try using it with your Amazon account, or with your Twitter account, or your Instagram account, and so on and so forth. And we call that a credential stuffing attack.
Credential stuffing.
So if you use a unique password with every single online service that you use, then that prevents you from becoming victim to a credential stuffing attack. But we are human beings, and we can only remember so many passwords. So that's a huge problem, because that's the reason why we reuse passwords. It's because it's difficult to remember so many passwords. So that's where a password manager comes in, because you don't have to remember what your Twitter password is, or what your Amazon password is, or what your Netflix password is, or the password for your online banking, or anything like that. You can let the password manager create a random password for you. And all you need to do is log into the password manager, and then you have your passwords for everything, and you don't need to remember it. So that's a big thing that everyone can do to improve their security.
Is there any password manager that you prefer?
That is an excellent question. A lot of people like 1Password and LastPass. Sometimes people use the password manager built into their web browser, like in Chrome or in Firefox. I honestly, on the web, I use the password manager built into Firefox, but I have a lot of colleagues who believe that using a third-party password manager like LastPass or 1Password is better. So I would like look into it and do your research.
Okay. So password manager is step number one. What is step number two?
Step number two, I think, is to look at all of the online services that you use and see how many of them will allow you to use 2FA. 2FA stands for second factor authentication. And what it means is you don't just have your password to log into your account, you have a second thing that you can use as well. Usually, it doesn't have to be, but most of the time, the second factor is a 6 or 7 digit number that is generated that you can use with your phone. So I'll give you an example. This is how I use 2FA with Google. If Google notices that I'm logging into Google from a device that I've never used before to log into Google, I will get a message on my phone that says, you're trying to log into your Google account from a new computer. Is this you? And there'll be a pop-up. And even though I use the right password, it wants to make sure that a cyber criminal isn't taking my password and trying to log into my Google account. So as long as I physically have my phone and I can unlock my phone, I can go in and say, yes, that's me. Sometimes 2FA works by sending you an email or a text message with a 6 or 7 digit number. And that 6 or 7 digit number can only be used for an hour or so, and then it expires. But then you quickly enter it in, then you can prove, yes, that really is me. So you have more than just the password to prove that you're you.
Right.
Now, if an online service doesn't have 2FA, there's absolutely nothing that you can do as a user to set it up with them. So for instance, I have a Disney Plus account. I don't have 2FA on Disney Plus because Disney Plus doesn't support 2FA at this time, which is a big problem. They should support 2FA, but that's out of my hands. And that's kind of scary as a consumer, is a lot of the things that affect your security aren't actually within your control. There are certain things that are within your control, but there are certain things that aren't within your control. A perfect analogy for non-technical people is driving. If you are a safe driver and you obey the rules of the road and you never drive drunk, you're going to be a lot less likely to die in a car accident. But there are factors outside of your control, like some crazy drunk driver crashing into you. But if you do what's within your control, you've improved your odds at least.
Right. Okay, so the other part that I will not forget is your book. You've released your first book, The Pen Tester Blueprint. And if I understood it right, it is about how you start a career as an ethical hacker.
Yeah, that book is the brainchild of my co-writer, Phil Wiley. So he started writing the book. He has a lot of experience in pen testing and with teaching other people how to be pen testers. And the book is based on his pen tester blueprint talks that he gives at cybersecurity events. And when he was partly in the process of writing the book, he realized that he wouldn't be able to finish it on time on his own. So he asked me to co-write the book with him, and I was tremendously honored. And I said yes right away. So a lot of the core principles in the book are him and his ideas, like the hacker mindset and the basics of the pen tester blueprint and stuff like that. But a lot of the contributions are from me, like, for example, the basics of cybersecurity that everyone should know, and all the interviews that I did, which give people who are thinking of a pen testing career useful knowledge about what are pen testing careers really like. How should I go about obtaining a career as a pen tester? And I think if you get advice just from one person, that's not as good as if you get advice from 30 people.
Yeah, I can understand. And the pen tester, just to be clear for people who are not familiar with, is a penetration tester.
Exactly. It's short for penetration
Yeah,
tester.
yeah. Every once in a while I'll forget that. I go like pen tester, pen tester. What is it again? What is your? Because you just mentioned.
Is there any ink in this thing? For podcast listeners, I have a pen and I'm pretending to write with it. I'm joking.
Because you're writing a next book you just mentioned.
Yeah, I signed another book deal with the same publisher, Wiley, and this one I'm writing on my own, and it's tentatively titled Better Security in 8 Steps. But this book is not for your ordinary consumer. This book is for businesses.
Right.
So businesses of all sizes, what are some basic things that they can do to improve their security? So I divide it into 8 basic steps. So I just started working on that book, but it's been fully planned already. And I'm really excited. I'm really excited to start writing books on my own. I would love to collaborate with Phil again. He was absolutely great to work with. But I really like the opportunity to write books on my own as well. So this year, although it's been absolutely awful because of the pandemic, it's been great for my career in some ways because I love writing books. And honestly, it's very exciting to think that, my books are in bookstores around the world. It's really cool. So,
Yes, I know about that part. When is the book due? When do you expect it to be published?
okay, so 8 ways. I think I will probably be finished writing it by May or June of next year. I have no idea when it's going to be published, but it'll probably be published at some point in 2021.
Right. Because you just said next year, that means 2021.
Yeah.
And is there already a book after that in your?
Yeah, I'm talking to another publisher, a different one, about another book. But because that contract hasn't been signed yet, I'm not going to go into details.
Okay.
And then there's another book that I'm also talking about with Wiley about doing. So I'm serious. Like I am serious about focusing on writing books
Yeah.
right now. So it's really cool that more than one major publisher has taken an interest in me. So I mean, I love working with Wiley. They've been absolutely wonderful. But it's great to just get as much of my work out there as possible. This is a really exciting phase in my career.
I can imagine. And of course, it's all been building up by blogging on all these various blogs since 2015.
Well, really since 2010, but my career didn't really pick up until 2016.
Okay.
I languished in obscurity for years before I was able to make any money doing what I do.
That's how it goes.
Yeah.
And on your Twitter handle, it's also on your Twitter profile, it also says advocate of hack, not crime.
Oh, I'd love to talk about that.
Yes, please.
Hacking is Not a Crime is an organization that one of my friends started because I don't know about the Dutch media, but in the English language media, they use the word hacker when a story is in the mainstream news about a cyber attack. And that's harmful to our community because the original computer hackers are not people doing bad things. They are the people who experimented with computer technology to invent new computer technologies. For instance, like peons of Silicon Valley, like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and Steve Wozniak and whatnot, and even like Mark Zuckerberg and people like that. Those are all people who identified as hackers, at least at some point in their career. And there are a lot of people who are also hackers who developed really important technologies, who are less famous and way, way, way less wealthy than any of those people. So it's harmful. And then like people who do penetration tests, so people who simulate cyber attacks to see how secure computers are and how the security of those computers can be improved. They're sometimes called ethical hackers. I think partly because there's a certification called the Certified Ethical Hacker. But it's all throughout my career, I've been very careful when I write about cyber attackers to call them cyber attackers or cyber criminals or words like that, and not call them hackers.
Right, right. So we got that too. You understand now there's a difference between a hacker and an attacker.
Yeah, exactly.
That was it for me. I thank you very much. Oh no, I forget one thing because I was intrigued by that too. You developed a PC game?
Yeah, that was long ago. That was just before my career took off. I learned a whole bunch of Python, and I learned how to use a game engine called RenPy. And I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I made a semi-autobiographical game, and I made all original graphical assets for it and everything. It's a visual novel game. And it's not a professional looking video game, but it was a cool little project that I did before I was able to make any money doing what I do now. So it's out there. Anything about me that's out there on the internet is fair game to talk about. If anyone would like to try and download it from itch.io and play it, be my guest. I also learned from that experience that developing video games is very, very hard, especially on your own. And honestly, it's a lot easier to do what I currently do for a living. So I have a lot more respect for people who make video games now.
Oh, that's good. That's a good experience then.
Yeah.
Kim, thank you very much for all your clarifications and insights about security and privacy. I love your how you educate the people who are not very good at this topic. I love seeing your book coming out next year, 2021, because I think that's an interesting book about better security in 8 steps and for businesses. So that's an interesting book that I'm looking forward to.
Thank you. And the Pen Tester Blueprint you can buy right now.
Yeah, yes. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.